gentlemen. Another one bites the dust in the pandemic economy. Construction company Great Earth pulled out of 5 projects and goes broke. So there you have it, 4 news for you, ladies and gentlemen, with me and Miguel Flores. World News Weekly Review. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again, and today is the 5th of September 2021 at 9:30 p.m. Singapore time. A lovely evening here in Singapore, and Singapore is actually opening the economy already. And welcome Miguel from Mexico City to be sharing the World News Weekly Review with all of us. Miguel, what's your first news, Miguel?
Hey Viki, thank you so much for the introduction. Let's get it on. First of all, I wanted to talk about the story of Oksana Masters. One of those stories that the Paralympic Games always delivers. I guess this is one of the stories that I really wanted to hear and I really want to talk about because it's something that it inspires us to continue and to think that we have to go on. It says basically the news puts it this way. All right, when we're talking about the Olympic Games, you have a lot of athletes preparing themselves for the biggest event of their lives, right? But in this case, we're talking about a person, Oksana Masters, that was confined into a hospital bed, just recovering from a leg surgery, right? Of course, 100 days ago, she never expected to win a gold medal in such an event. She was only thinking about making it through a surgery, okay? For the second time in Tokyo, she stood up in the podium, holding a gold medal for her and for her country. And that's why I wanted to talk about her. She's one of those stories of perseverance, of consistency, and most importantly, hope. One of the things that we need a lot in this world today, right? She added a second gold medal to the hand cycling road race. Also the one that she won on the same time trial the day before. And actually she said, I just couldn't believe that the stars literally aligned right there in that moment over the past 2 days. That's what she said to the media. And she said, I went from being uncertain about whether I would be able to land on the start line to just standing in the middle of the podium. It felt like a dream come true. That's what she is telling us to the media. 5-time Paralympian athlete. This girl has represented the United States in the Summer Olympics in rowing and cycling. And now she's doing it in the Paralympic Games, showing us a perseverance, a story that we really need in these days.
So she was actually an Olympian before.
Yeah.
And then she had an accident, and then she landed herself, and she continued her journey as a sportsman in the Paralympic. Am I right?
That is correct. But that's the thing. I mean, everything happened 3 months ago, more or less. She was actually just preparing for some situations. She also participated in the Rio de Janeiro Paralympic 5 years ago. But of course, her circumstances were not exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
And also a little bit of her is she was born in Ukraine. There was some people that actually believe she was a little bit linked, due to her condition to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, because she had 6 toes, webbed fingers, no thumbs, legs that were missing weight-bearing bones. I mean, unfortunately, she was born with a lot of different situations.
She was born without fingers.
Exactly. She has, first of all, 6 fingers in
6 fingers.
6 toes in her feet. No, and she had no thumbs.
She has no thumbs. She doesn't.
Exactly. So basically, everything that happened to her is just about perseverance, because it says that it's unclear if the Chernobyl reaction explosion in 1986 caused her limb defects.
Yeah, she was living around that area in Chernobyl.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also another thing to add to her story, she was in an orphanage. She didn't have any parents, and just looking at her standing on a Paralympic podium, representing the United States.
Well, that's a very powerful news that you have for us, Miguel. We're talking about a woman that is born in near to Chernobyl. I think Chernobyl's really close. The nuclear reactor was shut. Still really toxic there. And we're talking about someone who is born not fully normal and went on to 5 Olympics, and then because of certain accident, she went on to the Paralympic, and she got a gold medal, and she only got into the momentum of the Paralympic just a couple of months when she recovered from the surgery of a leg.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that I admire from this person, and not only from her. I also wanted to bring this news because this is only one of those stories, one of many stories that you hear from the Paralympic Games. Oh yes, the Olympic Games are, for the fancy situations and the TV spots, and to sell the rights to broadcast the event. But this one, the Paralympics, are just a powerful reminder that obstacles can be overcome.
Wow. I think this is really something tremendous. For humanity, we're talking about the human spirit. And Singapore actually won a gold medal for Paralympic just a couple of weeks ago, and an applause for all these medalists and all those who never made it to the headlines, and all these who never even had a medal. But salute to all the Paralympians, people who just made it, and people who never even make it to the Olympic heats. It's the spirit that counts. Miguel, it's really about getting on with life. I remember those times, Miguel, if you fall sick, and when my mom was ill, just getting her out of her chair. Can you imagine that amount of human spirit and also physical spirit when someone couldn't make it? We're not talking about getting a medal there. We're talking about human spirit, and I think and the news that you just read is so powerful. It kind of like just personify that human spirit that is unseen in everyone. I mean, every
Exactly.
person who is not able to use fully their limbs, or people who are sick on the bed, people who are suffering from old age, they can't get themselves out of their wheelchair. You're talking about people who are just bedridden. That goes out to them, Miguel. We're talking about the human spirit that is unseen. We're not even talking about people that are on beds, not able to have the basic human dignity of going to the toilet, for example. That kind of human spirit, that kind of tremendous power that they need to get themselves up, and also the helpers who are helping them. Talk about the Paralympics. I mean, that shines a light on those people who do not get the headlines, Miguel. I mean, that's a powerful news that you're presenting, Miguel.
Oh, no, actually, it is. And you said it yourself. Every time you see it, for example, I see it with a lot of Mexican athletes. The Mexican team actually brought home 24 medals from the Paralympics alone.
Yeah.
And actually, here in Mexico, we see the Paralympic athletes as the real guys that we are proud of. Of course, the Olympians are also something we're very proud of. Maybe we don't get as many medals as, for example, the United States, but well, that's a different story. But at the end of the day, it's something that really makes us feel proud, because overcoming obstacles. But when we see it with Paralympics, I mean, it's not because we feel bad of their situation. No, it's all the other way around.
Rise up despite their situation.
Exactly. Despite the situation, they are rising in ways that maybe people with no disabilities would never do.
Wonderful and powerful news from you, Miguel. Let's give them a round of applause. The Paralympians and also people who never make it to the headlines. Let's give them a round of applause.
Hell, of course.
Powerful news from you, Miguel. What do you have for the next news?
Of course.
Sinopharm.
Yes, actually, maybe this is not exactly one of those news that a lot of people would think about, but it's a Sinopharm subsidiary ready to deliver the new COVID-19 drug based on recovered patients.
To me, that
is also a big one.
To help. You're trying to save the people who are all in an ICU, right? In a critical care units, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those news that I actually believe that this.
Tell us more about the background of the news.
Yeah, actually, this week I wanted to bring some things that can make us think that maybe we're going on the right direction. Yes, the pandemic has been long, really long. Little by little, we try to just to make sure that we're making it, that we're surviving it sometimes. But news like this, like for example, this lab, the Chinese producer, China National Biotech Group, or CNBG, is delivering a drug based on human immunoglobulin. Oh my God. So really sorry to read it that way, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Well, it's a cell. It's a cell developed from the plasma of recovered patients, right? This is something very important because we are basically, it's like we have seen it also on the TV and
let me just rewind a little bit for the context of the viewers and the listeners. Yeah. The news is from Global Times, which is one of the Chinese news that is coming up from there. And, rare English news from the Chinese papers. Sinopharm, the subsidiary of Sinopharm, there's a huge vaccine that is already being developed after Sinovac. Sinovac is being used worldwide, millions and even billions of it is being sent. But now we're talking about Sinopharm, the next, I should say, the next biggest highlighted vaccine that is coming out from China. Their subsidiary, we're talking about the subsidiary of Sinopharm, they have developed this COVID-19 drug based on the patient's plasma, and they're going into human trials. And this particular treatment is aimed for treating critically ill patients suffering from the symptoms of COVID-19. So that's the background of the news. And Miguel was saying that this human trial is very important because it really goes to directly treat COVID-19 patients. Because right now there isn't a lot of drugs. There's a lot of tested. They're talking about malaria drugs. They're talking about a lot of whole host of drugs that is being treated to COVID-19 patients who are already suffering from COVID-19 symptoms. Tell us more about this trial, Miguel, from the news.
Yes, of course. Actually, this trial is something that is started. One of those things that they started to do right in the beginning of the pandemic, because since everybody realized that there was no treatment for this, not even a vaccine. I mean, the vaccine, I understand that a lot of people was a little skeptical because of the time the vaccine was delivered. It didn't matter what was the company that delivered it. But I understand being skeptical. I was skeptical myself too, I gotta admit. But considering that this is an emergency time, this is not a time where we are just, how can I say this? This is not a time to be just fooling around with wasting time. I believe that this company, this Chinese company, did what they have to do, considering that the biggest impact was in China. So it was logical for me to think that they had to move really quick. I mean, the development of this drug was very particular, because they haven't revealed, first of all, when and where they would launch the clinical trials, because there's still things to do, tests, other kind of information that they have to collect. There are not so many patients in China. That's another uncertainty that they are dealing with. Some experts actually were calling. And other expert noted that the drug should be limited to critical patients, as it may cost a lot, but it would still be cheaper than monoclonal antibody drugs. Basically, they have to run it on the critical patients because they would see that the reaction would be faster. But of course, the experts were very careful at saying that the drug may contain risk of infection from other viruses, such as HBV or HIV, as other blood-borne communicated diseases, right? So that's why it's even though we're talking about probably the only pharmaceutical company that is delivering trials, or is going to deliver trials on human patients, there's still a long way to go, because they need to make it as safe as they can for those patients. They are right now in the position of saying, okay, we have to be careful. There are still things we have to figure out. There's still things we have to consider to start 100% of the trials. I understand that it has to be in critical patients because they need to see the results fast. But also risk of side effects is exactly just the same as with the vaccine. They just cannot test it just for testing.
Yeah, just to echo what you say, Miguel, in Singapore, we are declaring the pandemic as an endemic right now. So in Singapore, they have really changed the concept of COVID-19 pandemic, and they've changed it to endemic, meaning that Singapore is using the strategy of living with COVID. Means that people will get on with their lives, and those who are tested positive but with very symptoms, they will be given flu medicine and flu drugs. So people will go on with their lives. They just isolate themselves in a room because 99% of the people do not fall ill, particularly those who are already vaccinated. So we are still into this experiment in Singapore, because Singapore is the first country in the world that declares it's an endemic and no more a pandemic. Endemic meaning it will never go away. You've got to live with it, and when you're sick, you've got to deal with it on your own, and we're just going to give you some medicine. Life will have to go on. So that's what it means by endemic and no more a pandemic. I think that takes the fear away. But of course, on the other side, we're talking about It's just an experiment. No one has done this before in the world, not even during the times of the Spanish flu. There wasn't a case whereby we treated a pandemic into an endemic situation. So it is an experiment that Singapore is undergoing, and people are going to the hospitals, and the numbers have risen, of course, and there is a need for treatment, like what you say, Sinopharm, one of the companies that is going to continuously develop treatments for severely critical situations. Those who are actually infected by COVID-19. Great news from you. Miguel, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, it's just another news that I wanted to bring to say, okay, this may not be the easiest times, we understand that, but little by little we're coming along, okay? Yes, maybe it's a little far from me because I'm in Mexico and they're in China, but if somebody is developing a drug to fight against COVID directly, it means that the end of this process is just coming a lot closer than we expect. It's going to be sooner than later, I have to say.
I think we all need some form of encouragement, don't we, Miguel? Always reminded me when you switch on the news, it's always still about COVID-19. When you switch on the news, business news, is still affected by the virus because the numbers of the stocks, right, is directly correlated with the numbers that is rising.
Exactly.
Cases. We cannot run away from that. But great news from you, Miguel. I've got a news for everyone and also from Miguel. The news that I've chosen, I think it's really close to my heart. I've lived in France for about 7 years, kept in Singapore because of the pandemic, and I'm still refusing to get onto the flight. I'm still refusing to go into a risky situation where I am in control of, that I don't have to get on a plane, because once you are in there, you are not in your control. So therefore, this news for everyone from France. One of the main news, we call it France 24, means France 24. 7th consecutive weekly protest against France COVID-19 health pass. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the 7th consecutive weekly protest by the people against the government policy, against France's latest regulation about a health passport. And let me read to everyone. This is the 7th weekend. A total of 160,000 people protested across France on Saturday, said the Interior Ministry. And the people are angered at the country's COVID-19 health pass. It means a health passport, which I will explain a little bit. At the country's COVID-19 policy, which unjustly, the people said, restrict the unvaccinated people movement around the country. And they say that the people say that vaccine isn't the solution. And because the schools are reopening, parents aren't, the parents are avoiding to let the children go to school, or they are not sending their children to be vaccinated. And of course, in Europe, you are talking about a whole range of other kinds of vaccines, including AstraZeneca, produced by Oxford University, but AstraZeneca, produced by Oxford University, has proven to be fatal in many cases. And in Bordeaux, it is said that several protesters were refusing to get their children vaccinated even days before the start of a school year. They say that we aren't laboratory rats. The father of an 11-year-old boy said, we are a free country. There is no real numbers that justify mass vaccination, says the father. So you've got the whole of France. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the news for you that I'm presenting, and I would like to explain to Miguel and to the listeners and to the viewers the significance of this news. Number one, a lot of people are still in the debate of vax and anti-vax. Not only that, they're talking about studying into the side effects of different kinds of vaccine by different kinds of doctors themselves, and also health physicians in France. So there is a huge uprising of people who do not want to be vaccinated, even at these times, even in huge numbers of death across France in 2020 and 2021. That's the first issue. The second issue is that parents are stopping children from being vaccinated. Number three, it is it is a regulation, or rather a law passed by Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, that without a health passport, you aren't able to get up the public transport, you can't go into the supermarket, you can't go to restaurants, and you can't take the trams or the train, the public transport I'm talking about. So this has been out since a few months ago, that Emmanuel Macron has actually legislated that people who aren't vaccinated, you can go freely in your life, you can walk in the streets, but if you go to a supermarket, you need to show that you are vaccinated with an electronic health scan that you have been vaccinated, or if you go up to the bus, you have to show that you're vaccinated. Otherwise, the bus driver will ask you to get out of the bus. So this is something that has been a huge debate for the last 3 months. It is a huge thing because when I call my friends in France, people are debating, and I've got people French within the families, husband and wives, they are quarreling because the wives do not want to be vaccinated, the husbands want to be vaccinated, and there you have it, huge upheaval within the French household and huge upheaval within the French society. And not only that, you're talking about freedom, rights, you're talking about freedom of movement and also the constitution. So the French have protested, and this is the 7th consecutive Saturday, and the numbers are dwindling down, of course, according to the news, that people across France are uprising against the freedom of movement and the freedom of right to choose a vaccine. So we're talking about a multitude of different layers of issues. We're talking about, number one, vax against anti-vax, doctors against doctors, physicians against physicians, mothers against fathers, and also the rights of the people of movement, rights of other people who demand that they can go up public transport, that they should be able to go into restaurants, and they should be going into the supermarket. And I'm glad I'm here in Singapore. I'm not in the heat of things, but I do know that in France, when there is an uprising, people take it seriously, and people who are not involved in such big protests, they actually huddle in their homes, they shut their doors, they will not go out to the streets. Because I am in the middle of such huge demonstrations when I was in France. People do go out to the streets, and you can't have a violent police against people. We're talking about a very huge situation in a country like in France, because people take their rights very seriously. And we're not even talking about the pandemic situation. I thought in 2020, we have seen that during the Trump administration. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, a news for you from me, huge significant news from France that is typical of people who actually argue, and not only about people, doctors who do not want to be vaccinated, nurses who refuse to be vaccinated. We're talking about a whole host of argument against it. Any questions, Miguel, would you like to comment?
Probably one question, but it has to be more related to a personal opinion. But what are they thinking about when they are making protests, considering that being close to a lot of people is actually a big risk of getting COVID? I mean, I don't know if it's right, but
okay, just to answer your news, in 2020, there is already a huge uprising amongst maskers and anti-maskers. So it is not the first time in Europe we're talking about something like this: maskers versus anti-maskers, vaxxers versus anti-vax. We're talking about another issue, but it's always one school of thought versus another school of thought, and I'm not here to talk about and analyze any one of those school of thoughts. I'm presenting that this is already happening in Europe, and it's not something that is unseen. It is already happening in 2020. We're going into 2021. We're going into vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers, and neither am I able to analyze the depths of it, because you're talking of people who are bringing up the constitution, about freedom of movement, about the right of a president that actually declares a decree that stops the movement, the freedom of movement of people. So people are protesting on different levels there. And I've seen that the French are very fervent, being living in France, they are fervent for their rights. They are fervent over their rights, even if it means that right is something that is good for them, because they do not want it to be decreed, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, of course.
So, yeah.
I actually have something really quick, ma'am. I understand that the Macron's measurements were a little bit aggressive, because I believe it's not really about just to measure themselves, but because of how aggressive they were. But considering that the governments needed to do something, at least to prevent the spreading of the virus, or the governments in general needed to do something about it, I mean, I would understand why he did it. Okay, maybe, yes, this freedom of movement being stopped in like that way, so aggressively. I mean, yes, I understand the bitterness of the people in France, but in this case, I want to understand both parts. You know, the government had to do it because they didn't want bigger numbers of deceased people because of COVID, but people needs to move because they need to do their lives. And like, for example, what you said in Singapore, they are adopting a policy of living with it. I believe that's what the people in France wants to do. Okay, there is no cure. Let's find a way to live with it. You know, I guess that's pretty much the idea.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, the news from me out from France. Thanks, Miguel, for his opinion. And with this, I also invite audience and listeners who tune in to the show, either in my own podcast, Talk About Life by Viki Esther and Lifestyle TV USA, or my radio show on IOW Network. You can write to me, write to us about your opinion, to participate in a discussion. Write to me at talkaboutlife777@gmail.com. I've got a third news, or the second news for myself, and the final news for all of you. It's straight out of Singapore. And I thought this is very, very important, because this news, one of the main headlines in business news, construction company Great Earth pulled out from 5 projects and goes broke, meaning they goes bust. The Singapore construction company pulled out from 5 construction projects, huge construction projects last month, in the midst of financial problems, that is now shutting down its business and is appointing provisional liquidators to liquidate the company, which means that they will not be able to pay certain subcontractors and certain creditors. And it is a company that is contracted by the Singapore government to build housing for the people. And the ministry, one of the offshoots of the agency, the Housing and Development Board, said that last month 5 projects under the ministry is going to be further delayed because the contractors are unable to carry out the projects due to financial difficulties, and it's going to affect homes of 2,982 apartments of up to 13 blocks of apartment in Singapore. And this is significant because, ladies and gentlemen, I'm bringing the news to you because it is unprecedented in the whole of history that a construction company stops construction And this is the news I'm presenting because it shows a symptomatic of the pandemic economy that a lot of countries are going through. And some of these companies that are struggling do not hit the headlines. And this hit the headlines because it's a huge company, as a huge contractor that is actually being outsourced by the Singapore government to build public housing. Therefore, it made it to the headlines. But can you imagine a lot of businesses go bust without going to the headlines? Because we're talking about a new era of the pandemic economy that businesses are not able to pivot to the new era that is in the midst of the pandemic and post-pandemic. So we're talking about here, subcontractors say that they are owed money and they are seeing that they may not be able to be paid the amount outstanding to them. And think about it, ladies and gentlemen, and these are small contractors. These are people, small companies that's going to do the lights, electrical, the piping for the big contractors, and also to build up walls, and also to build a toilet and put on the tiles. Now these are smaller companies that are going to employ thousands and thousands of workers. They will not be able to pay the workers. So in economics, like you say, the whole logistical chain of events is going to happen where with the end of it, the people are going to suffer because the jobs are going to be cut. So you've got a huge contractor there who are going bust for 5 development projects in Singapore, and then the subcontractors aren't going to be paid, and the workers are going to be retrenched, and other subcontractors may go bust also. So we're talking about a pandemic economy, ladies and gentlemen. So from myself to you and to Miguel, one of the news that I'm very passionate about economics and about the business in pandemic, as we all try to pivot, and of course, sadly to say, not all businesses are able to pivot. Miguel?
It's very difficult to see it, but this is also a little reminder of this thing being serious. I mean, companies shutting down because of this situation. I mean, the companies are a big engine of the world's or local economies. It doesn't matter if they're small, it doesn't matter if they're big. Their contribution to the local or the country economies is so big that it's something we also have to pay attention to. Yes, we focus a lot of people getting vaccinated, kids going back to school, just getting into a supermarket, but these guys also see it hard. I mean, imagine there's 5 big, there were 5 big projects. I mean as far as I can see here,
billion dollar contracts, like what you say, you're right, Miguel. Sometimes we talk about, okay, the retailers or the shopkeepers, the pizza companies out there in the street, they're going to shut down, definitely, but huge companies shut down when we don't see them. We're talking about, for example, you're talking about $1 billion, multi-billion dollar contract that building big buildings for housing for many thousands of people. Number one, they are going bust because of the prolonged pandemic situation, the economy shutting down, closures. You're talking about circuit breakers, talking about lockdowns, and they have to continue to pay the workers where even when there is a shutdown. So we're talking about the pain of these companies, and this is one of the things that really shocked me, and it makes me sit like, yes, I am in here, we are arguing about, yes, the economy is not going full-fledged, we're talking about people dying, we're talking about people suffering, we're also talking about masses and masses of unseen businesses that are going bust, that do not make it to the headlines. I mean, that pains me, because when a company goes bust, who's going to suffer? The people, the workers, they aren't going to be paid. Salaries are the last thing that will be paid. The first one going to be paid, the banks, right? Banks are lending the projects. So then, who's not going to be paid? The workers, they're going to be retrenched. And we're talking about companies like that because they have been suffering. They were on prolonged lockdown for like almost 20 months now. Restriction of workers, the workers can't come back to the construction site, they are all on lockdown, or workers who are sick, Miguel,
Yeah,
workers were
yeah.
supposed to be driving the trucks. They are sick. They have to be sent to the hospital, and no one is replacing them. So a lot of disruption in every economy, Miguel.
It was. It felt like a really domino effect here.
Yes, of
Because
course.
once you affect the top part of the scheme in a company, well, little by little, it's going to escalate into every single position like a huge snowball. It starts something very slow, but it's starting at the top of the
Exactly.
mountain. Right now,
Exactly.
when it's in the bottom of a mountain, rolling, 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 then you see something is going to explode. Of course, it was going to be something like this. I mean, once again, this is not something to be joking about, the pandemic situation. And I believe we have emphasized that a lot of times. Uh, and we don't want to sound repetitive, but of course we want to bring you some stories to show you the perspective of the situation. First of all, there's also the good side, but there's also bad side. I mean, things are
I mean,
happening right
we
now.
heard about in France, right? You're talking about a
Exactly.
7 week, 160,000 protesters, and they say that number is already dwindled. Can you imagine? It's
It doesn't
almost
matter.
like 250,000 started. Because when I was in France, you can talk about 500,000 people out in the street protesting about certain policies of the government, and when they do, they can get into a violent situation with the police, and people do die during these huge confrontation. Even though they are said to be peaceful, they started out with a heart of being peaceful, to voice out concern of parents, to voice out concern of the community. But when someone starts that fire, it just rage. I mean, I've seen it where I was, the streets were burned, shops were knocked down, shops were being set on fire, people died, they lose their limbs, they lose their eyes, in the name of in the name of a cause. So, my heart goes out to the French, whichever side we're in. We're not there to say right or wrong. We're reviewing the news, presenting to the people. But I invite Miguel and also the listeners and the viewers to write in your point of view and also your own review for your news. I mean, that's a wonderful news, Miguel, that brought to us, number one, the Paralympics. I think we need some form of a hope in the midst of news, because no news is good news. I think Miguel has given us one of the hope of the world, Miguel. Thank you, Miguel, for that news.
Don't worry. It's always good to talk about something that really lights the spirit up. Okay, sometimes we need those stories.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel.
Definitely, we need them.
Yeah, for that wonderful news about the human spirit. I think your news kind of signified that, I think we can make it in the pandemic. I think we've got another 2 minutes. Let's have some a review of 4 of our news. Miguel, just to come back to you, great news from you, particularly of the Paralympic. It's really about the human spirit, about hope, about strength, about striving towards success despite the situation, in spite of the situation. And kudos to people who are medalists, but also much more congratulations and much more much more encouragement and inspiration for those who do not make to the headlines, people who are not medalists, people who strive. You're talking about gold medal that is only one, but a lot of people do not make it to being a medalist. But you know what?
Exactly.
They work as much. And
exactly.
I mean, that is so much human spirit behind that. And also the old folks out there, you are a Paralympian. If you are on the bed, if you're listening and watching us, you are a Paralympic, a gold medalist. If you're struggling in your home right now, a father, a mother, a student, or a daughter, hats off to you, Miguel.
No, yes, and sometimes understanding and learning their circumstances, it's also a bright spot there. It's always something important so important for me at least, to remind ourselves every time that it really doesn't matter about the circumstances. We can still go on. Yes, for example, with these construction companies, yes, the circumstances may not be the best, but the people is going to strive. Somehow humanity has been has been developing, evolving, and adapting all the time. So even though this is not one of the best times, humanity is gonna do it.
Thank you so much, and that wraps up our core news, Miguel. And last 15 seconds, back to you. Would you like to say goodbye and thank you?
Goodbye to everybody. We're gonna see you the next time, and we're gonna bring you some more news to talk about life.
Wow, I mean, Miguel, I just want to say a huge thank you to you and to both of us for making it to this new series, World News Weekly Review with Miguel Flores from Mexico City as my co-host. And always wonderful to have Miguel, always giving us hope in the midst of the dreary, dark, negative news of the world. Thank you, Miguel. And before we do say goodbye, another trailer for Miguel Flores for you to tune in again to his show next week, same time on Talk About Life, Lifestyle TV USA, and radio wherever we are in 35 countries and growing, and also